You check your blood pressure at home. Maybe you've been doing it for years. You look at the top number. You look at the bottom number. And like millions of people over 60, you've probably been watching the wrong one. Somewhere along the way, someone told you the bottom number was the one to worry about. So every time you take a reading, that's the number you look at first. That's the number that makes you feel relieved or worried. But after more than 30 years in cardiology, I can tell you something I wish every older adult heard much sooner. The patients who worry me most are almost never the ones with obviously alarming numbers. They're the ones who look at a reading like 158/74, see that bottom number, and think, well, that's not too bad. Those are often the patients I end up seeing years later, after valuable time has already been lost. Because here's what almost nobody explains. Decades ago, focusing on the bottom number wasn't entirely wrong, but your arteries at 65 are not your arteries at 35. As we get older, the way high blood pressure affects the body changes, and with it, the number that deserves your attention can change too. Nobody sits you down and explains that. Not at the pharmacy, not in a waiting room, and sometimes not even during a routine doctor's visit. That's exactly why so many people continue watching the wrong number, without ever realizing it. In this video, I'm going to show you the 3 blood pressure patterns that concern cardiologists the most after 60, including the one that fools more people than any other. Once you understand them, you'll never look at your blood pressure monitor the same way again. But before we continue, tell me in the comments, which number do you usually pay attention to first, the top or the bottom? I read every comment on this channel. Now, let's start with the mistake I see more than any other. The mistake I see more than any other has a name: isolated systolic hypertension. If you've never heard that term before, you're not alone. It's the most common form of high blood pressure after 60, and it's also one of the most misunderstood. Here's why. Imagine a brand new rubber garden hose. Soft, flexible. Every time water rushes through it, the walls stretch slightly and absorb part of the pressure. Now imagine that same hose after sitting in the sun for 20 years. It's stiffer, less flexible. Now, when water rushes through, there's almost nothing left to absorb the force. The pressure travels straight through. Something very similar happens inside your arteries as the years go by. When you were younger, your arteries expanded with every heartbeat. That natural flexibility helped cushion the pressure. But as we get older, those artery walls gradually become stiffer. So every time the heart pumps, the pressure wave hits a less flexible artery, and your top number, the systolic pressure, begins to rise. Meanwhile, the bottom number often changes very little. Sometimes it even becomes slightly lower. That's not because the blood pressure machine is wrong, and it doesn't necessarily mean your blood pressure is improving. It's often a normal consequence of aging arteries. And that's exactly where so many people are misled. They see a reading like 158/74. Their eyes immediately go to the 74, and they think, that doesn't look too bad. But as a cardiologist, the first number I look at is the 158, because when the systolic pressure stays elevated, it continues placing extra strain on the heart, the brain, the kidneys, and the blood vessels, one heartbeat after another, usually without causing any symptoms. That's why isolated systolic hypertension is so often discovered late. People feel perfectly well, while that extra pressure has been quietly building for years. So here's the first takeaway. If your top number is consistently 140 or higher on repeated readings, it deserves a conversation with your doctor, even if, and especially if, The bottom number looks perfectly normal. That's the first blood pressure pattern I want you to remember. The second one is even more surprising because it involves a reading that many people celebrate, when it may actually deserve a closer look instead. Here's the second blood pressure pattern, and it surprises almost everyone, because it's the exact opposite of the first. This time, the numbers look too good. Imagine someone in their late 70s. They've been taking blood pressure medication for years. At every checkup, their readings look better. Their doctor is happy. Their family feels reassured. Even they start thinking, finally, my blood pressure is under control. But then, something begins to change. Standing up from the couch takes a little longer. They reach for the wall walking down the hallway. They feel slightly lightheaded getting out of bed. Maybe they even have a close call reaching for something in the kitchen. Most people assume that's simply part of getting older. But when I see this pattern, I don't look at the top number first. I look at the bottom one. Here's why. Between every heartbeat, your heart briefly relaxes. During that short pause, the heart muscle receives much of its own blood supply, and that blood flow depends in part on your diastolic pressure, the bottom number. If that number becomes too low, especially in someone over 60 with naturally stiffer arteries, the heart may not be getting the blood flow it needs during those resting moments. That's one reason why some people begin feeling dizzy, weak, or unsteady, even though their blood pressure appears to be perfect. A bottom number that stays below 60, particularly in someone taking blood pressure medication, isn't automatically a cause for panic, but it is something your doctor should know about, especially if it's happening alongside dizziness, fatigue, or feeling unsteady on your feet. In many cases, a careful adjustment of medication, made gradually and under medical supervision, is enough to make those symptoms disappear. Because the goal of treating blood pressure was never to chase the lowest possible number. The goal is to protect your heart, protect your brain, and help you stay active, steady, and independent. Lower isn't always better. Safer is. And after 60, those two things aren't always the same. That's blood pressure pattern number 2. Now let's look at the third, because this one hides in plain sight, inside a number that almost nobody thinks to calculate. The third blood pressure pattern is the one that surprises even people who check their readings regularly, because this time, both numbers can look perfectly acceptable. Imagine an 82-year-old woman. She still drives herself to book club. She still enjoys cooking Sunday dinner for her family. She's not coming to see me because she's seriously ill. She's coming because something has been quietly changing. She gets tired more easily. Her legs feel heavier walking back to the car. She's stopped using the stairs at her son's house, not because anyone told her to, but because they suddenly seem like more effort than they used to. Little by little, her world has become smaller, and she hardly realizes it's happening. Now look at her blood pressure log. 168/58, 172/60, 166/56. Most people look at those readings and immediately ask, is the bottom number okay? But that's not the first thing I notice. I look at the space between the two numbers. That space has a name. Pulse pressure. It's simply your top number minus your bottom number. And it can tell us something important about how flexible your arteries are. In a healthy adult, pulse pressure is often around 40 points at rest. But as arteries become stiffer with age, that gap can become much wider. Sometimes 60, sometimes 70, sometimes even more. A widening pulse pressure doesn't automatically mean something is seriously wrong, but it can be another clue that the arteries are becoming less able to cushion each heartbeat. And that's exactly what I was seeing in this patient. She wasn't simply slowing down because she was 82. Her cardiovascular system had been giving quiet warning signs for years, hidden in a number nobody had ever explained to her. So I'd like you to do something with me. Think about your last blood pressure reading, or pause this video for a moment and look it up. Now subtract your bottom number from your top number. That's your pulse pressure. Write that number in the comments. I genuinely read them, and I'm curious to see how many people have never calculated it before today. As a general guide, a pulse pressure around 40 is common in healthy adults. If yours is consistently above 60, especially if you're also noticing fatigue, reduced exercise tolerance, or feeling less steady than you used to, that's worth discussing with your doctor. Now you've seen the 3 blood pressure patterns I wish every older adult understood. Let's put them together. Now, let's bring everything together, because each of these 3 patterns matters on its own, but together, they completely change the way you should read your blood pressure. If your top number stays consistently high, it deserves attention, even if the bottom number looks perfectly normal. If your bottom number stays unusually low, especially if you're taking blood pressure medication and feeling dizzy or unsteady, that deserves attention too. And if the gap between the 2 numbers keeps getting wider, even when both numbers seem acceptable, that deserves attention as well. But here's the biggest lesson I hope you remember after today's video. Your blood pressure monitor isn't giving you 2 separate numbers. It's telling you one story. A story about your arteries, your heart, and how both have changed over the years. If you only look at one number, you're only reading part of that story. So here's something simple you can do today. Take your last 3 blood pressure readings, not just today's. Look at the trend. Ask yourself 3 questions. Has my top number been consistently above 140? Has my bottom number been consistently below 60, especially if I'm taking medication and feeling dizzy or unsteady? Has my pulse pressure, the gap between the 2 numbers, been consistently above 60? If the answer to any of those questions is yes, don't ignore it. Write those readings down, take them to your next appointment, and have a conversation with your doctor about the complete picture, not just the one number you've always focused on. One important reminder: please don't stop, reduce, or change your blood pressure medication because of anything you've heard in this video. These are patterns to recognize, not treatment decisions to make on your own. Those decisions should always be made together with your healthcare provider, because sometimes the most important part of protecting your heart is simply asking the right question. If today's video changed the way you'll look at your blood pressure monitor, I think you'll also enjoy the video on your screen now. In it, I explain one simple type of exercise that may help support both your heart health and your ability to stay active and independent as you get older. I'm Dr. Ethan Cole. Thank you for watching. And remember, don't just read the numbers. Understand the story they're trying to tell.